Make sure you don't miss a thing. Go to starzology.com/newsletter and sign up. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here again.
So nice to have you with us once more. So in this episode, we're doing something slightly different. We're going to be looking at some forecasting, and specifically, we're going to be looking at the progress moon transiting Saturn lockstep.
Yeah.
Now, that's quite a mouthful.
I know. When I saw it on our calendar, I was like, what are we talking about? Like, okay, I guess I won't be doing much research for this one.
So we're talking about two separate forecasting things. One is the progress moon. We'll go over that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is transiting Saturn, and we'll go over that.
Awesome.
And how this affects people or not, because it really does not affect everybody, but it certainly does affect some people. And before we started, we've just dug around and found a couple of people who happen to have it. You've got one in your life. I happen to have one in my life.
Yeah.
And we can probably talk about that as well.
Yeah.
So
when we say that not everybody has this, everyone has a progress moon and everyone has Saturn transits.
Yeah.
But these are going to affect certain people more than others.
Correct.
Based on the aspects they had in their birth chart.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just to be ultra clear.
So to be ultra clear, if you have an aspect between the moon and Saturn in your birth chart, and I'm talking Ptolemaic, and I'm specifically talking conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, although we do know someone with a trine, then this is going to affect you more than anybody else. So I don't have it and you don't have it, right?
Exactly. And those would be the hard aspects, as they say. Even in conjunction, it's not really a hard aspect, but it's definitely the most important aspect.
Yeah, yeah. So what happens is, in your birth chart, you've got the moon in a certain position and you've got Saturn in a certain position. Mm-hmm. And as you age and get to, we're looking at around the age 30 to start with. As you get around to your Saturn return, which takes around 29 to 30 years, you will also experience your progress moon return, which again takes around 29 to 30 years.
Yeah, and they happen right around the same time. And I think the moon happens a little before.
It depends.
Yeah.
So the depending is, it depends on two things, whether the aspects in the natal chart, is the moon applying to the aspect? Because if it is, it will tighten up over the course of your life and still be separating afterwards. And additionally, where is Saturn in its retrograde cycle? Because Saturn will retrograde back and forth, but the progress moon only goes forward.
Right.
So it all hinges on what's going on in the birth chart.
Yeah. So if you have an aspect between Saturn and the moon in your chart, what's the best way to know if these aspects are in lockstep once you reach the age of, let's say, 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever?
Because if the moon is applying to the aspect, it will tighten up over time.
So when you go into your little chart and you see
the aspectarian.
Yeah, exactly. You see the table of aspects. You'll see a little A next to that aspect.
Meaning
it's applying.
Yes, meaning that the moon is applying to the aspect.
Yeah. And if it's got a little S next to it, that means it's separating.
Yes.
And that means that the longer you go into your life, the less tight that aspect
it will separate, but it will still be there for several years.
Yeah.
And then it will separate.
By the time you're maybe 40, 50, it won't be as strong.
Exactly. Well, it does depend, right?
It does
But
depend.
if the moon is applying, say the moon is applying to a conjunction at 8 degrees away, it will over time come forward and make, what do they call, create the exact partile aspect, and then it will still be separating for 8 degrees afterwards. So this is the particular case when the moon is applying 8 degrees to Saturn with the conjunction, with the square, and with the opposition, that this hangs around for up to 65 years.
Wow.
So if you have this aspect or one of these aspects within your chart, it matters because it's creating a huge background noise, background theme that you basically are struggling to get away from, that is being established for a long, long time in your life.
Right. And that's just in addition to having a Moon-Saturn aspect to begin with, which is also already kind of a thing.
It absolutely is, right? It absolutely is.
But when we're talking about these progressions and transits, that background noise will become kind of louder static around these times, right? So around your progressed moon.
It will always be, they will continue the aspect. You see, this is the trick.
But it'll just kind of get louder and more jangly when you have like your Saturn return, that kind of thing, when they come into, right?
Well, if you have the progress moon and transiting Saturn conjunct, they move off at the same pace. Mm-hmm. So they maintain their conjunction for that 30-year period, and ultimately probably the 60-year period, which may be applying or not, depending on what Saturn's doing, retrograding back and forth. So the actual aspect remains in position between these two planets. Mm-hmm. And this is the trick.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm making myself clear. So let me know, Arwynne, if we need to just re-go over what we just said before we move forward.
I think we're good. We're good. Yeah. without all sorts of like solar system diagrams and
yes.
Yeah.
So you have a chart, am I correct? You've got a chart there with an aspect between Saturn and the moon?
Yeah, not my chart, but it is a friend's chart.
Okay.
And he has a square of the moon and Saturn in his birth chart, and it is applying.
Okay, so he's got the moon squaring Saturn. This is a natal aspect that we're talking about.
Correct.
So this would certainly, and because you say it's applying, this is certainly the sort of thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then the example chart I have is of an opposition. The moon is opposing Saturn, but it's actually separating in birth. Mm-hmm. However, it's still worth mentioning because it's going to be in a feature for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So first of all, let's have a little bit of a look at the progress moon. What do we mean when we say that? Yeah. And then we'll look at Saturn, and then we'll sort of bring the two together.
Great.
So with secondary progressions, what this really means for those who don't know is that because it's an indirect forecasting technique, it's not something you can look out and see that moon. The progress moon comes from your natal chart position. For every year of your life is equal to 1 day move forward in the ephemeris.
Right.
So you would look in the natal chart, and if your moon is in a particular position, you would then look 50 days later in the ephemeris and find the position to find the progress moon, or all the progress planets particularly, but we're particularly talking about the moon. And the reason we're talking about the moon and Saturn is that the progress moon takes 30 years to go round to the conjunction again, through all the phases, and then transiting Saturn takes about 30 years to go all the way around as well.
Yeah, and that's just that has to do with Saturn's orbit around the sun, which is about 30 years, and the fact that progressions are 1 day equals 1 year, and of course the moon goes around
in just on a month.
Yeah, for 30 days.
Yeah.
So makes sense.
Super interesting. So what you have is in the example chart we've got the moon there at 12 degrees Scorpio, and 30 days later it will come round to be 12 degrees Scorpio again. But so by progression, it will be then back at its natal position.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what progressions really mean, that we're looking at 1 day in the ephemeris equals 1 year of your life.
Do they call that a progressed lunar return?
They do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the reason that this is significant with Saturn is because that would also then coincide with your first Saturn return, which happens around the age of 29, 30.
So tell us about the transiting Saturn then.
The Saturn return. Saturn obviously takes 30 years to go around the zodiac to the place where it was when you were born. And the Saturn return is one of those things and we've likened this to, Mercury retrograde, where even non-astrologers have heard of it.
Yes.
I believe there was a famous book in the 70s for anyone who's of that generation called Passages, which was all about, this sort of not midlife crisis, but like the 30-year-old crisis.
Yes.
This is totally what this is about. It happens again when you're around 56 and again when you're
87-ish, depending.
Yeah, which right after your Uranus return.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you be so lucky? Yeah. So those things are big life-defining kind of changes, and that's one of those resets where if you're not on the right track, you're going to be, maybe slapped down by fate or suffer some sort of a setback, or be kind of forcibly ejected from a comfort zone, or put onto the right track, or forced off the right track and made to scramble until you find the right track. And it's all for the purpose of, in terms of whatever your Saturn placement is, of living that best life and not being too comfortable, but also not being a child. Yes. So the whole point of the Saturn return is it's your emergence into adulthood. And it's interesting that, we think of the old timey times. 30 was old. You were an old maid by that point.
Yeah.
Well, the planets beg to differ because, astrologers knew that you weren't really an adult until your Saturn return.
Yes.
And very much so. This is when you will have, graduated from all of the colleges, most likely, if you started right out of high school. And even if you're going to be a doctor or something like that, by the time you are 28, 9, 30, you're probably, on the way to being whatever kind of doctor you were going to be, or lawyer, or whatever it is that takes the longest amount of school.
Yeah.
You may be in your first or second serious relationship. You could be, heading for your first divorce even at that point.
Yeah.
Something usually major and life-changing kind of happens around that time, for good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's both.
And these days we see people who actually don't get married until they're 30. People are not having kids as young anymore. Yeah. So you've got this 30-year cycle of Saturn coming around, and that's just a transit that's happening. You can look up there's Saturn and see it going around your chart.
Yeah.
And as we just said about the progress moon, it will move one day for each year that you are alive.
Yeah.
So if you have, say, for example, Moon conjunct Saturn in your natal chart, it will maintain its connection for at least the first 30 years, because it's through the progress moon and the transiting Saturn are still conjoined for you as a main theme for your life. So it's a main forecasting theme. So this is not something that's popping up for the year and going away like another type of transit may.
Right.
This is something that's kind of, you're living with it.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine.
Sure.
But yes.
Yeah.
So you're living with this combination, and that's specifically really what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and it may be one of those things too for people who feel like they, after their Saturn return, they reach that graduation point or they got out of that relationship, or they got into like what they thought was the most stable relationship possible, or they got into that great job, and then these things maybe just keep coming up in their life, and they're like, I thought I was over this. I thought I had graduated. Why am I still dealing with this? Why am I being made to feel like a child again as a grown ass person?
Exactly.
Right. And
exactly.
This is possibly why.
Well, this is it. So let's face it, if you have an aspect between the moon and Saturn in your natal chart, this is going to be a feature in your life for a long time. And if you're an astrologer, you need to pay attention to this particular pattern, because depending on the aspect, it's bringing the moon and Saturn together.
Yeah.
Now, generally, if we look and say that the moon is representative of your mother, which is just one of its features, we can also say that Saturn is a representative of your father as the authority figure.
Yeah.
So these kind of connections tend to indicate parental issues that either you can't get out from underneath of, or if they're challenging, that the parents are constantly at each other about how to bring up this kid.
Right. Yeah. Or you're carrying forth that conflict into your own relationship.
Yes.
And you find yourself repeating patterns that you experienced in childhood with your parents. Or possibly your parents end up having to parent your parents.
Your parents.
And and this could be a recurring theme for you.
Yeah. So if you've got the moon applying within 8 degrees, this will definitely last at least 60 years in general, but you need to check it, because Saturn will retrograde out as well, and it may move out of the orb and then come back in, but the theme remains as background noise for the whole life.
Yeah.
But if you've got, say, the moon separating from Saturn, it will then ease off maybe in 5 or 10 years of age and pass on out. So, of course, we also have to consider that even if you don't have an aspect, if the moon is moving towards Saturn, by the time you're, say, 10 years old, it may then engage and lock into this Saturn pattern that we're talking about, this lockstep. It's called the progress moon transiting Saturn lockstep, because it's constantly, you're doing 2 steps forward and 1 step back, because Saturn will go back and forth.
It's like the least fun party dance ever.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's not like the Macarena
or the twist or the
time warp again.
Not at all. Although maybe it is a little like the time warp.
Yeah. So the main aspects that I consider with this are definitely the conjunction. If you've got a chart with a conjunction, you really want to pay attention to that, because these themes are together. They are melded within the actual life, no matter what else is going on in the chart.
Yeah, exactly. Because every other thing in your chart and every other transit that occurs in your chart is going to treat that conjunction of the moon and Saturn as one unit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a tricky aspect. Let's face it. A tricky aspect.
Yeah.
So then if we look at the opposition, which is the example chart I have here of somebody, and this is where we've got the Saturn is at 4 degrees Taurus and the moon is at 12 degrees Scorpio. They are in opposition, but the moon is going to move out of that 8-degree orb to break that pattern at a certain age in this person's life. So as an astrologer, you need to go out and cast these charts and find out at what point was this released, this parental pressure on the person.
Mm-hmm. Would you think that would be a time of rebellion?
Well, it could be a time of saying, well, I'm glad they sorted that out, and I'm not going to, whatever you learnt at your mother's knee, you're going to say, well, maybe it's not working for me, or your father's knee, or something like that. There's a separation.
Yeah.
As it breaks from the actual the actual opposition there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. And I haven't actually progressed this chart forward, but we can do that in a moment. So you've got this, Taurus Scorpio tension going on from birth.
Yeah.
But it does eventually ease. And we know that because we can see that the moon is separating.
Yeah.
So as an astrologer looking at the natal, you could see it was in effect. This woman is over 50 now. You could probably say, well, it's probably past, but you'd still need to check when did it release its throttle on the person, because it's actually an opposition. It's quite a tough one.
Interesting. Yeah.
And what was the aspect you have?
Yeah, so this chart is a friend, and he has the moon in Pisces squaring Saturn in Sagittarius, natally, and it is applying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this would be one that is going to tighten up as the moon moves forward each year to that conjunction and then continue on.
Right.
And if we transited his chart forward or progressed his chart forward, which we can probably do in a moment, we could see that this is still in effect.
Yeah.
And with it being a square, this is typically a place where the parents are at loggerheads. And because it's a square, which is always an internal dilemma for the person, they are struggling with, why don't mom and dad get on? Yeah. This is upsetting me. Even though they may be quite good with their bickering, it's taken internally because it's the square.
So he felt like he was in the middle or pulled one way and then the other.
Yes.
And
Whereas when you have the opposition between the sun and the moon, it's then an external dilemma where the person eventually will see, these two can't get on. It's clear and obvious to everybody. And there are opposite ends of the spectrum about whether it's parenting or even as you're older, or political views or how things should be, or the role of the woman, the role of the man. And
it's easy to picture that, because if you picture yourself in the middle of two people who are on opposite sides of you, if you have your hands spread out left to right, you can't actually see both of them in the same
at the same time.
At the same time, you have to be looking at one or the other.
Yes.
Which makes it easy, I would think, easier to separate yourself and be like, this is your problem.
Exactly. It's the external dilemma.
Right.
Yeah.
But if it's a square, you're always able to see both of them.
Yes.
You can't be touching both of them at the same time because they're 90 degrees from each other. But they are always going to be both influencing you, maybe not physically, parents come and go, but
they do.
But yeah, maybe that influence is always going to be sort of, and depending on obviously the strength of those two planets in the person's chart.
Well, this is the next step, right? Yeah. So we would have to say, well, if the moon is in Pisces and Saturn is in Sagittarius, neither are particularly well placed.
Yeah, right.
But as it moves, as the two planets move, they will go through signs where they are better placed. And so when you're looking at the chart today, you may find that Saturn is in Capricorn or something, and in a far better position. Well, we know it's not. We know it's in Aries, right? But or the moon is in somehow squaring it. I don't know, coming in from
the moon is in the first house natally, so it's got that. Is that an accidental? What do they call that?
Accident? No.
It's somehow stronger just because it's in the first house.
But we know that the transiting Saturn's in Aries at the moment, I believe, and then his moon is probably ending up in Cancer because it's squaring, and therefore it's the moon would then be in
opposite.
A dominating position at this point.
Yeah.
So you would have to look at the chart.
Yes.
Sure. But this is an interesting thing that you can see when you look at someone's natal chart, just at a glance, that you have to say, is there an aspect between the moon and Saturn? Oh, yes, there is. I need to explore this further.
Yeah. Yeah.
And get to know exactly, because they will talk to you about these themes. Right. They will say, my parents, this and that. I was brought up to be X, Y, Z. Yeah. And my mother, this and that. And my father, this. And they could be 45 years old and they're still telling you.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. So if you're a fledgling consulting astrologer and you're trying to figure out a way to get into the charts of the people who come to you, this is something to look for.
Absolutely. It's got to be
in the top 10 aspects to look for.
Well, you've got to when you realize what it is, because there will be other aspects in the chart, but they are not going to stick out and be locked in this lockstep that it's called, as Saturn goes round, clack, 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 clack. It's like a cog in a wheel, because Saturn's going back and forth, right, with the retrograde, but the moon is moving forward.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Definitely.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about some really challenging aspects between the moon and Saturn, and we do have another chart now, or Arwynne has another chart now, where the moon is actually trining Saturn in the natal chart.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about that?
I can. It's actually my partner, so it's someone who I know very, very well.
Right.
We've been together 26 years. Oh. Yeah. And he has the...
Give the woman a medal. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Which is not to say he's difficult. He is amazing. We are just incredibly lucky and fortunate and, karmically blessed and whatever. Anyway, his moon is in Cancer in the 9th house, and his Saturn is in Aquarius in the 4th house.
Yes.
And they're trine.
So is the moon applying to the trine, or so what's the aspect?
Yeah, so the moon is at 1 degree Cancer.
Yeah.
And Saturn is at 28 degrees Aquarius.
Super interesting. So they're in dissociate. It's a dissociate trine because they're both not in the same element, right? Yeah. The moon's in water and Saturn's in Aquarius. But the big thing here is that the moon is in its own sign. It's super strong. It's got dignity.
Yeah.
And so does Saturn.
Yeah.
In Aquarius.
Yeah. It's like he
won the jackpot on the lockstep.
Right.
And it's a trine. I mean, it's like, what would you call that? A trifecta? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
The moon is strong or confident. Saturn is strong and confident, and it's a trine, so it's working well together.
Yeah.
So this parental emphasis within his life would have been, one would assume, pleasant and not the biggest problem in his life.
Absolutely. 100% true. And in his case, it's extra interesting because he was adopted at birth. Oh. And his adoptive parents were the most amazing couple. I only ever met his mother because his father passed away the year before I met Roger. But they were together from teenagehood until the day he passed away suddenly. And she died, like less than 2 years later.
Okay.
Broken heart sort of situation. She just tried to soldier on and just, it's like, nope, not really interested in being here without him.
Right.
And fair enough. He says that he never even saw them fight.
Trine.
Yeah. They were the perfect parents. His sisters also adopted from a different family. And neither of them ever wanted to know about their birth parents. They were like, they knew from a very young age that they were adopted. Their parents were both like, anytime you want to know, we have, we can search if you want, but we adopted you because we couldn't have children biologically. We adopted you because we love you and we're a family of choice. And they accepted that 100%. They were like, this is great. I don't care about those, biological donors, whatever.
Yes.
And he ended up meeting his biological family way later in life when we got together after like a couple of years later. And it really put into perspective why he had been so lucky with his family.
And this is amazing because what we're saying here is that the mother trine, father, confident in their own signs.
Totally.
Honestly, could it be any better?
Yeah.
This combination of this trine.
It was absolutely perfect.
And even today, we're praising this parental approach to his upbringing and whatnot. And he's not, Yeah, it doesn't have any bad thing to say about them. Like they were just... It's amazing. So there you have this lockstep has worked well for him and create, because it's the ease of the trine, which is being brought forward.
Yeah, and all the things that you would think of the moon and Saturn in terms of like imparting, a sense of time, a sense of responsibility, a sense of honor, a sense of, like respect for other people. He has that in excellent quantity. Like he's one of the most morally good people I've ever met. And,
Right.
and I'm not just like gushing. He's like, oh, I get to look at my boyfriend on the podcast. But I mean, being with him has made me a better person. I think I was a lot more spiteful, a lot more sarcastic, a lot more dismissive of people. And I'm friendly, but I'm also kind of an introvert by nature.
Yes.
And so when I get around people, there was always something sort of performative about the way I was friendly with people.
Yes.
And I would have one really close friend at a time. And I would try to have, as many kind of acquaintances as possible, but more in a sense of like, oh, I just like to, know that people like me. And I don't think I was actually, doing a lot to be likable in my 20s, to be honest,
Okay.
until I met him. And there were a lot of things about my personality that came into kind of sharp focus of like, oh God, that's not a great way to treat people, or that's not a great way to, and yeah.
Wow. He seems like a saint, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, I mean, God, everyone has,
Yeah, I do.
Whatever. He plays sports and a bunch of other stuff too. So there's aggressive tendencies that get worked out in other ways.
Yes.
I mean, we've talked about his Mars and Leo, but yeah, as far as like just that solid upbringing of moral high ground and all that stuff, it's just deeply baked in his chart. Good parenting. Good parenting.
That is absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So that's the trine coming through there. Yeah. And then I'll just talk about this one we have with the opposition, where I did, to remind you, the moon is separating from Saturn. So this particular combination eased during the course of her life.
Yeah.
And I happen to know what actually happened was that her father died, and then her mother continued on flying the flag, and she totally looks up to her mother and everything that she was taught by her, that she's now inspiring her children with what Granny would have done.
Right.
And so whilst it was released through, unfortunately, the death of the father, the mother then took the role and became the powerhouse within this person's chart.
So that natal opposition almost became like a conjunction where the mother took on all the qualities of the mother and the father.
Yes. And it's actually very interesting how... we all know that the psychiatrists start off and say, well, tell me about your mother. This is solid. And if you do have aspects within someone's chart, you really need to look at this, because it's going to give you some insights into how they are, how they were parented, and how they even see their parents as well.
Yeah. And how they continue to be affected by those aspects, despite what how they may feel that they've separated themselves from that early influence.
Yes.
Yeah.
So something else I just want to mention about this while we're talking about this is that if you have a person and you have a partner who's perhaps their Saturn is conjoined your moon, or your moon is conjoined their Saturn, as example, square or opposition, you're going to, from the point of your relationship, you're going to have this built into your relationship too.
Right.
So that is another consideration to take, that if, say, for instance, you've got your moon in whatever sign and they've got their Saturn conjoining your moon, you're going to have that connection, and the transit and the progressed will move off within the relationship to influence how you bring up your children and how you approach parenting yourself, and which praise do you have for your parents, and who's saint and who isn't,
Yeah, totally. And just, the basic things of like running a household, even if you don't have children and become parents, you still have to file your taxes and
cook some food, Where's the food? My mother used to cook. Why haven't you cooked? Right. That's what you're going to get if you've got these connections that are challenging, particularly the square and the opposition, from your partner to your moon or to your Saturn.
Yeah. And as we said, like with my partner, it could be a great thing where you feel like this person has the ability to kind of elevate your sense of personal responsibility and make you kind of strive to be better. Or it could be a thing where it's like, oh my God, you're not my father. Like, why do you keep, why are you harping on me? Like,
and why,
the guy who thinks, oh, I've married my mother, that, those old tropes. Well, these.
This is people. They're saying, why can't you cook the roast chicken like my mother did? Yeah. Shall I get her to give you the recipe? I mean, what are you thinking? But that's what's coming through because of the connection between your two charts is moons and Saturn. Yeah. So be on the lookout for that when you're doing couples work as well.
Totally.
Wow. Yeah. I know. Okay, so we've just had a closer look at Arwynne's and her partner's charts, and Arwynne's going to share with us a very interesting thing we've just discovered.
I'm going to, not to throw you under the bus, but when you discovered this, you cackled in such a way that I've never heard before, which is hilarious. I just want our audience to know what you're capable of. So it turns out that my Saturn is conjunct within 1 degree of his Cancer. So yes, guilty as charged.
His moon.
Moon, that's right. I have Saturn in Cancer. He has moon in Cancer. His is at 1 degree. Mine is at 2 degrees. They could not be more conjunct if they tried.
Yes.
Yeah.
So these two planets are moving at the same pace.
Yeah.
So this conjunction between the two will be in position.
People wonder why it's so hard to get us to move any furniture in our apartment. It's like, well, no, it's there.
So what are we saying? It's your moon, and let's face it, you are the woman.
Uh-huh.
And it's his Saturn, let's face it, he is the guy.
Yes.
Which is a great combination, right?
Yeah. Well, he does all the cooking. I mean.
But, Saturn's in Cancer. But you've got this, I want to say this male-female, this woman-man, this wife-husband almost combination, because it's moon, Saturn conjoined. Thank God it's conjoined.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like, it sounds like I'm bragging, and it's so funny because, no, I don't. Anyway, so we've been together obviously 26 years. We did actually officially get engaged last year, and this was because the engagement ring that his mother wore her entire life came into our possession all of a sudden last year because his sister and he reconciled, and his sister was like, oh my God, you guys have been together for 26 years. You should have this. And he proposed at that moment, was like, yeah, okay. And at first he was kind of stumbling over his words because maybe some alcohol might have been involved. And we were, around a raging fire. And he said at first, husband, would you be my husband or wife or whatever? And I was like, yes, both, all of them, all three.
Wow.
Whatever. Yes, I will be your husband and your wife. I just thought that was worth adding because you said
absolutely. And
what could be more us than that? It's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Husband, wife, doesn't matter.
And maybe when you get around to that second Saturn return and second progress moon return, the conjunction, which will be in 30 years from when you met, technically, we can anticipate
an actual ceremony.
Well,
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's
yeah, we can do
it's a great combination because you've got Saturn in Cancer and the moon is obviously in Cancer too.
Yeah.
So the moon is dominating there. It's going to be
the moon is dominating.
It is.
Yeah.
Saturn's in it's not happily placed. It's in detriment there, but. This moon is bringing positive vibes towards you, and the fact that you met him, and this is this connection you have in your bi-wheels anyway.
Yeah,
it's just so interesting, and we've only just discovered this. Just by the way, listeners, we've only just had a closer look at.
I mean, I kind of knew, but yeah.
So how fun is that?
It's fun. It's one of those great aspects that we have.
It's a great connection between the two of you, and
it's funny. Some people might think of it as a kind of oppressive thing when they first meet someone. Oh no, Saturn's right on my moon, or whatever. Especially if it's the girl with the moon, She might think, "Oh my God, it's like daddy issues," but it's not.
Yeah,
it's a stability thing too.
It's the long haul.
Yeah,
it really is.
We have enough like weird Pluto Uranus aspects in our chart that add plenty of excitement and craziness. Yeah, so it's really good to have that Saturn Moon thing.
So it's interesting that you can also take this Moon Saturn lockstep and look at relationships as well.
Yeah.
Which it's so interesting. And we do see this when I look at you and him. I mean, this is being expressed through your relationship anyway. We know this, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have been talking about the progress moon transiting Saturn lockstep. We've spoken about how the progress moon takes 30 years to get round, how the transiting Saturn takes 30 years to get round. And if you have this aspect in your natal chart, it's going to be lingering with you for a while at least. We've also then been looking at some of the different aspects, the conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, also a trine, and we have considered also inter-chart aspects of the Saturn and the Moon between two people, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is something that you can see immediately when you look at a natal chart. So next time you see a natal chart, you're going to be looking for this because you need to explore it further.
Yeah.
It will give you so much more insights into the person.
Totally.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening and getting this far. Make sure that you're getting our newsletter, and that is from starzology.com/newsletter. Make sure that you're following Arwynne, and you can find Arwynne at
mspink.net. That's mspink.net. And I send out a weekly newsletter every Saturday. I am blogging about art, books, goddesses, a bit of astrology, and a little bit of whatever interests me. It's a good read.
Fantastic, yeah. So if you found value in this episode, please do consider sharing it with anybody else. And so, Arwynne, I'd like to thank you for being here today and for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Alison. This has been fun.
And thank you so much to our listeners, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.